Well, the 25th Governor of the Reserve Bank of India, Shaktikanta has chaired his first board meeting today. Although it was the second such meeting of the board in less than a month, the members discussed various issues that have been a point of contention between the central bank and the government in the centre. The board discussed issues pertaining to governance framework and global and domestic challenges, but it completely steered clear of the prompt corrective action framework. This is what we told you. It was not on the agenda today because, remember, the PCA framework review is with the BFS within the Reserve Bank of India. That's the Financial Services Committee. Over the next 30 minutes, we discuss in detail the points taken up and those that were given a miss. Good evening. Thanks for joining us on this show. I'm Shireen Bhan. First up, let's go across to my colleague Ritu Singh. Ritu, we've got a very brief statement, all of one paragraph that's been issued by the Reserve Bank of India. But what has emerged from this first meeting?
Well, Shireen, to sum it all, it looks like the board has stayed away from all the controversial subjects in the first meeting where Shaktikanta has chaired, this meeting as the new RBI governor. So let's take up some of these, contentious issues that were taken up. First, of course, was the issue of governance. Now, the release, given by Reserve Bank of India did say that the issue of governance structure of the Reserve Bank of India was brought up in the meeting, but the board has come to the conclusion that that subject requires further examination. Therefore, no further details were given as to what the board thought of the matter, but they will, they did not really take any decisions in this regard. Do remember the government has been asking that the board have more powers, in the functioning of the Reserve Bank of India, and that has been a bone of contention between the RBI and the government. The second issue was the prompt corrective action norms, and that has really again come to the fore after Union Minister Piyush Goyal tweeted that the Reserve Bank of India had changed the rules of PCA halfway through the game and not really kept, all the stakeholders in the loop. But of course, as we had reported earlier, there was very much a consultation that took place between the RBI and the DFS. Letters were exchanged, at least 3, informing the Department of Financial Services of the changes proposed in the prompt corrective action norms.
Okay. Ritu, hang in.
Yeah.
Hang in there. Hang in there. I'm going to come back to you because we are now joined by Sachin Chaturvedi, board member of the Reserve Bank of India. Mr. Chaturvedi, many thanks for joining us. Our first board meeting where we saw the new governor sort of address some of these issues, discuss some of these issues. We've got a one-paragraph statement that the Reserve Bank has put forward by way of giving us some sense of what went on. Can you give us some color on what were the issues that were discussed today, sir?
Shireen, I would not be making more than what that one paragraph says because I'm bound by the confidentiality clause. And more so, I think your correspondent is absolutely right in terms of how the board today actually avoided all those issues, as I think is very rightly reported. The fact that governance framework of RBI was there, as the press brief also mentions, I think is absolutely correct. It captures all the 4 broad contours of it, namely the global challenges, the challenges that are there of liquidity here back home, and then also trying to see how currency management is to be done, and of course the credit delivery. So it captures really the issues on which we had seen all these controversies, and then we were also trying to see how we are trying to address broad trends and progress, particularly
right.
Bringing
Mr. Chaturvedi, I just wanted to ask you, sir, and I understand and I appreciate the fact that you're bound by confidentiality. I wanted to get your reaction to what we have seen are the comments that have come in from many ministers in the government. The Finance Minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, tweeting about the PCA framework, saying that there was no consultation. But of course, we do know that there in the past has been consultation between the government and the Reserve Bank on that issue. So, it looks like the government is very clear that a review of the PCA framework, for instance, is necessary. It is the need of the hour. How would the board be reacting to the comments that have come in so far?
No, I think the board was pragmatic. We had all different kinds of views, which again, as I said, I would not be talking about, but we can definitely mention the larger spirit with which RBI has also sort of given the press brief, it captures the details in the right earnestness, I would say, in terms of both the partnership and also in terms of how we would be managing some of these issues in the days to come.
Okay. Sir, any update on whether the BFS, which is looking into the issue of the PCA review, has firmed up its report? How soon is it expected to firm up its report? Was an update given today to the board?
No, but what came to the board was more a report that would be soon launched by RBI on state of banking in India. So that we would be, that's a routine report that is issued generally in December. So that we discussed, and I think it would be issued very soon by RBI.
Okay. Has there been any updates, sir, on the panel that is expected to be... Okay.
Yeah, so
any update on the panel that was expected to be set up on the capital reserves issue, sir? Because that was something that was awaited also.
Yeah, no, we could not get into details of that today, but I am sure in the first quarter meeting next year probably it would come up, and then we would have some of these issues.
So no decision has been taken on the composition yet?
No.
Okay. This was the first meeting of Shaktikanta Das. My last question, sir. First meeting of Shaktikanta Das. Give me some sense of what the interaction was like.
No, it was absolutely fantastic. I mean, he brings in his characteristic conciliatory approach. So he was very much there. He gave chance to everyone to speak. In fact, he asked everyone, which I think is absolutely democratic in terms of getting everyone along. So that was very widely appreciated in the board. Everybody enjoyed interacting and was heard. That was the most important thing. And he also mentioned about his meetings of yesterday. So I think he was forthcoming, he was open, and more importantly, was very democratic in his approach.
Mr. Chaturvedi, sorry, if I may add one more question, sir. Would the board necessarily have to clear any changes, if at all, to the prompt corrective action norms? Or could we hear some changes coming from the RBI even before the next board meeting?
This is part of the issue that we discussed as to what are the lines within which the board functions, what are the contours of that action. So that is still to be concluded. We had some discussions, but as I'm telling you, and as the press brief from the RBI also mentions, we haven't gone beyond that point. So those issues are still not addressed fully.
Not addressed, and probably will be taken up at the next board meeting of the Reserve Bank. Mr. Chaturvedi, appreciate you joining us here, sir, on CNBC TV 18. Sachin Chaturvedi, board member of the Reserve Bank, on the conversation and the engagement that took place at the board meeting today. Well, let's now go across to Arvind Binmani and Anant Narayanan also with us. Anant, you probably listened in on what the RBI board member was telling us, and you've seen the statement from the Reserve Bank of India and the comments that have come in before the board meeting from various government ministers. What's your sense now on the road ahead on some of these issues?
Well, first off, Shireen, I think it's a relief that we had a short board meeting, 5 hours shorter than the last time. Probably a sign of the changing times and maybe a more conciliatory board.
I agree. I completely agree with you.
I do hope and pray. I do hope and pray that we find a way of putting the genie back into the bottle. This whole scepter of the board becoming more activist and the government getting more activist in terms of directing the RBI to do things. If you recollect, the note after the previous board meeting distinctly had sections saying the board directs the RBI to do the following. I think that's a bad genie which has been let out of the bottle. We have to put it back. Yes, of course, RBI needs to be accountable and we need to have a lot of scrutiny on things that RBI has done. But I'm not sure, in fact, I'm pretty sure that the government is not the right body to direct the RBI to do things. There are different compulsions involved and we have to find a way of getting back to a neutral, RBI. The last bit on those contentious issues, look, there is always room for conciliation. Each of these issues, I'm sure there will be conciliation. I just hope the conciliation doesn't result in something which is only the RBI giving forbearance. The deeper reforms, such as banking reforms, such as infrastructure reforms, etc., power sector reforms, are the ones that really will solve the problem for us. we don't want to concentrate only on the palliatives and let these bigger medicines away.
Right. That's a very good point that you make, and let me take that across to the former Chief Economic Advisor, Arvind Virmani. Dr. Virmani, would that be a concern that you would share as well, that given the points of friction that we've seen so far, that perhaps the road forward could be more palliative and more forbearance expected from the Reserve Bank of India as opposed to real changes and real reform?
Well, no, I don't agree with that. I mean, I agree with the statement you made. Here is the thing, credibility depends on making professional arguments which are seen by a majority of professionals as having merit. To think that every single issue can be resolved by one view would not be correct. But I think the basic difference between a central bank being directed arbitrarily by a political government versus one which is credible is to have credible professional arguments. So I think that will be the key test. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know whether on every issue that will be true, but I think some of these issues are resolvable by professional argument and judgment, and we may not all agree with that solution, but if the RBI can give reasoned professional arguments in favor of their own case, then I think they will be accepted and credible. There may, however, be certain issues where that is not true. So I expect actually a mix of those two things. I don't think it's going to be just one or the other.
Okay, you don't believe it's going to be just one or the other. Very quickly, since there were no decisions taken today, so not much to discuss. Anant, let me get wrap-up comments from each of you, and I'll start with you. What is it that you will now be watching out for? What is the market going to be watching out for from here on?
Oh, now we need to see what really comes out of those contentious issues. I completely share Dr. Virmani's hope that, we do see proper professional arguments coming through on each of the issues, whether it's the question of excess capital, PCA banks, relaxations, SMEs, whatever it is, all these issues, let there be a proper argument in the public domain, let people, experts weigh in as well, and let's arrive at compromises which are acceptable to a significant section of the, unbiased observers. If that comes about, great. I think the fear the market continues to have, given the legacy of what we've gone through with Dr. Patel putting in his papers, is that the government might be pushing through its agenda, and what we might come out with as the solutions might be something which is more going towards government's immediate requirements. If that happens, frankly, the markets will be disappointed. I hope that doesn't happen, and I hope a better sense prevails. In any case, I think one positive which has emerged is clearly a better communication channel between all stakeholders, which is clearly welcome.
Yes, absolutely. Certainly is a sea change as far as communication is concerned. Dr. Virmani, 30 seconds, sir. What would your expectation be now as we look forward?
So this is your discussion is a good demonstration of what I am saying, where Mr. Anant and I have agreed, after a discussion, we are able to reach a professional agreement. So as I said, there will be, I think, okay, let me give you a number. You like numbers. I think 70% or more of the cases can and will be professionally resolved. There may be 30% or less where we may still have questions whether the RBI is really acting properly or independently. Let me kind of give you a guess of the kind of things which may happen. Yeah.
Okay, so 30% where we may see more controversy, but on a large balance, you believe that a consensus will be arrived at. Dr. Virmani, Anant, appreciate you joining us here as we take stock of the board meeting, a rather short board meeting if you compare it to the previous one of the Reserve Bank of India, and the first that was chaired by the new Governor Shaktikanta Das. On that note, we'll take a break, but when we return, Gemini Bhagwati, RBI Chair Professor at ICRIA, also joins us. We're back in a moment. Professor Bhagwati, appreciate you joining us here on cnbc TV 18. No decisions in that sense being taken by the RBI at the first board meeting chaired by Shaktikanta Das, the new governor of the Reserve Bank of India, both as far as the issues of governance are concerned, saying that they would require more time to deliberate, and on matters related to liquidity, credit delivery and currency management, etc. as well, suggesting that further examination is required. Do you believe that, especially when it comes to governance-related issues, that we could see this being pushed off the table as a priority item now that there has been a leadership change?
You know, the priorities remain the same. It's natural that RBI and government will have somewhat different perspectives. The RBI is concerned about inflation. It is concerned about financial sector integrity. It is concerned about overall growth. But the government obviously has a broader mandate, and they have an all-encompassing concern about how to grow employment opportunities and how to push the economy onto a higher trajectory of growth. And ultimately, if I look at what is going on more recently, it is how to get project financing back on track. So those are the differences in the priorities between the two. And I'm hoping that a new beginning, with a new RBI governor, we'll see that the discussions between the two will happen behind closed doors. Then we don't hear too much of it. I think it's natural that there will be differences.
Yes.
But those differences can be ironed out, and I'll wait for you to ask me some more specific questions.
Yeah, you know, you're saying that you hope that these differences will be ironed out behind closed doors. But, sir, I want to draw your attention to the comments that have come in from several ministers within the cabinet. Minister Goyal yesterday tweeting, saying that one cannot have power without being responsible to use that power. At the end of the day, public interest is paramount. This in the context of autonomy of institutions. The finance minister also very categorically suggesting that, that they have spoken with the Reserve Bank of India in the past under Urjit Patel. And he says, and I quote, "I can't imagine how bringing issues on credit and liquidity to the attention of the RBI can lead to a question of autonomy of the central bank." So the government, in a sense, making it very clear that Urjit Patel didn't deliver on the promise of growth. And if you look at the comments that have come in from the new governor, he did very categorically state that financial stability or monetary policy is not the only remit of the Reserve Bank of India. Growth is, and he quoted the preamble of the RBI Act. So, what do you believe is now going to be the way forward, given the fact that North Block has made its position very clear?
You referred to some statements about power and accountability. I mean, everybody will agree that these are the two sides of the same coin. Same coin, pardon me. I think it's about as obvious as saying that the sun comes out from the east. Every entity, every individual, which or who enjoys some power, must also be accountable to someone. And I don't want to get into what former Governor Dr. Urjit Patel did or said. I'd rather talk in terms of the institution. I don't think that any governor of RBI would ever say that they have absolutely no concern about economic growth. Now, economic growth is a concept which people can address or come at from so many different angles. Do we do something in the short term which hurts us in the medium to long term. It's the usual thing. The governments, because of their political compulsions, after all, they have to win elections, sometimes have to look at things at the shorter term. And the Reserve Bank of India, because they are appointees and they have fixed terms which could be renewed, they have the luxury or the benefit to take a look at things over the longer term. So now these two views may not exactly coincide. For instance, inflation. The MPC says that, they are going to keep rates on hold. If I remember right, that was their decision at the last meeting. Some very well-informed and I think knowledgeable people might have said that no, it was high time to cut rates, particularly since now that we know that CPI has come down quite sharply, and I think the WPI numbers are also down. I think they were released today. So, this is not something that I find I would not find fault with anyone, because the longer-term objectives for this country are to, as I will repeat, promote employment opportunities and sustained high growth. But how to do it, how to arrive at those two desired objectives, I think intelligent, reasonable people can differ.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. Of course, there can be differences of opinion, but let me get your opinion, sir, on an issue that is currently being considered. And given where we see the economy today, you talked about inflation, the fact that growth at least has come in at a three-quarter low at this point in time. The clamor seems to be building for a fiscal stimulus, especially in the context of the electoral setback for the ruling party. Do you believe that that is the need of the hour, and what would you be concerned about as this clamor picks up?
One number cannot encompass everything that is happening in the economy, and I would look more at capital expenditure. If you look at the numbers for capital expenditure, if that is something that the government embarks on in a considered manner, and if for that reason, and I'm emphasizing again, capital expenditure as distinct from consumption or current expenditure, and it is thought out well, both in terms of how much would be spent and how it would be spent and through which channels it would be spent. You might recall, though, all that hoopla about projects between 2008 and 2012 or even 13 of public-private partnerships and so on. A number of institutions have come to grief. When I say institutions, I'm referring to public sector banks, because it wasn't thought out. Now, coming back to government's fiscal deficit targets, as I said at the outset of my response to your question, I believe that this is not something which is sacrosanct, and whether 3.2 is the right number and 3.5 is the wrong number, I don't know. I would not be averse to a 3.5 or even a 3.6 number. And I wouldn't worry too much about these rating agencies. These are the same rating agencies, Moody's and S&P, which gave AAA ratings to mortgage-backed securities in 2005, 6, 7, even almost till the...
Oh, absolutely. You're right on that count. Rating agencies have often gotten it wrong, and horribly so. So you're not a fiscal deficit hawk, as you pointed out, but you would like to see more being spent on capital expenditure and not on a national farm loan waiver. Germany Bhagwati, thanks very much for joining us on CNBC TV 18. With that, it is time for us to wrap up a special on the Reserve Bank's first meeting chaired by the new Governor Shaktikanta Das. We'll take a break. A lot more coming up. Don't go anywhere.